to my final project for MDS 289, and I'm going to be going over America's healthcare system from an interdisciplinary approach. So why I chose this topic: America's healthcare system is failing on many levels. It's pretty obvious, and it's becoming more and more apparent. Financially, it's becoming extremely expensive to be healthy in America. We have some of the highest spending on healthcare, which I'll get into later. Also, I want to talk about the lack of education and preventative medicine and lifestyle, nutrition, and how we're overworked and we don't sleep a lot and we're overstressed, and it's causing us a lot of problems. So another reason why I chose this problem is I had a transformative experience when I was in South Korea. Basically, I was vacationing with family in Virginia Beach, and I was driving down the road, and I was noticing all the billboards in America advertising for food are all basically junk food. There was images of fries flying through the air and like corn syrup soda just crashing into freshly shaved ice and cheeseburgers and all this stuff. And it was wild. And then at the end of the week after my vacation, I went to South Korea, and I was driving down the road, and I saw the same types of advertisements for fast food, but they looked more like this. They were hands picking things out of gardens and people gardening and fresh food. And gosh, everything was way more healthy. The people were more healthy, and it really got me to think and want to reevaluate how Americans eat and Americans' healthcare system and preventative medicine. So I'm going to be approaching this issue from an interdisciplinary perspective using history, comparing the health of Americans today versus previous centuries, and the politics behind our healthcare systems. I'm going to be talking about lobbyists, politicians, and companies and the power that they have on our healthcare system, and evolutionary biology, talking about humans as a whole and what we are and how we got to where we are today. It's going to be pretty interesting. So, what is killing us exactly? Heart disease. Heart disease is the #1 cause of death in the United States. Approximately 659,000 people die of heart disease every year in the United States. That's about one every 36 seconds, or 1 in 4 deaths. So I was looking at a recent study from 2016 to 2017. The cost of heart disease in America is about $363 billion. So I'm going to break down what heart disease is. So coronary artery disease, otherwise known as heart disease, is the most common type of heart disease. And from studies I saw, in 2019, 360,900 people died from coronary artery disease. In America, 6.7% of people over the age of 20 have coronary artery disease. So that adds up to be 2 in 10 deaths under the age of 65. So you can see here, coronary artery disease is basically when you have a blockage from plaque inside of your arteries. You can see it here. I'm going to show another picture here soon, but this is happening inside of veins that are supplying the heart with oxygen. So these are veins, and then I'll get into the ventricles here soon. So here's a better picture of it. So basically how a heart attack happens is plaque blocks up these arteries right here that supply your heart with oxygen, and it can form a blood clot. And when blood stops flowing, the area that vein was being supplied with blood actually dies. It can die and then form scar tissue, and a lot of times these heart attacks will happen without people even knowing. I was an EMT for a while, and basically all of my calls were heart issues or drug addicts overdosing or trauma injuries, but I would get heart issues all the time, and it really sparked my interest in this topic because that was most of our calls. So a little breakdown of demographics. Heart disease doesn't really seem to discriminate in America. It's pretty evenly spread, as you've seen. This is coming from the CDC's website. One interesting thing is like the American diet seems to cause this, because if you take these nationalities and when people are in their homelands, such as like a Japanese immigrant, Like, they don't have these problems existing in their culture before, but as they immigrate to America, you see the same exact rates of heart disease and causes of mortality as all other Americans, when previously, like, I'm just using Japan for example because they're a pretty healthy country, but as people move to America and adopt this lifestyle and diet, they get these same exact rates of all these different diseases. So here's the risk factors. This is also coming from the CDC's website. Overweight and obesity, diabetes, unhealthy diet, physical inactivity, excessive alcohol use. And I don't know if you remember from the American Heart Association Foundation, the jump rope from heart from elementary school, but that's what that picture is for. So this is coming from out of a study, which I've linked in the description below. About 90% of cardiovascular diseases are preventable. They are preventable illnesses, and they're foodborne illnesses, and there's a lot of evidence to support that. So I mentioned Korea earlier as a very healthy country compared to America because I lived there. I also lived in Italy, and I noticed how much healthier people were just because of lifestyle differences. Like in Korea, they work really hard and they're always busy, but they eat really well, and it kind of equals out that. And in Italy, they sleep a lot. They get more sleep than us. They're less stressed, and they have a totally different diet. There's so much less processed food over there, and they live super long over there, even despite having high rates of smoking over there. So their lifestyle differences really help them out, and they lived way longer than us. Right now, South Korea is on track to become the longest living country in the world because of their diet and how they live. But the only reason why they're not the currently oldest living country in the world right now is because the factor of the Korean War is still counted into that. So a lot of people died young there in the 1950s, but once that equals out, they are some of the longest living people in the world. And so here's healthcare costs per person. We are number one. On average, every year, Americans spend $10,586 on healthcare per person every year. And so the next runners up are Switzerland, Norway, Germany, and Sweden. So here's a graph of that. Here's that steep drop off all the way to the right. There's the United States. We are over $10,000 per person per year. But if you combine all that throughout the whole entire country per year, that ends up being about $4 trillion a year that is spent on healthcare. Pretty wild. So now I'm going to get into the history of all this. So most of human evolution actually happened in the Paleolithic period. That's about 2.5 million years ago to 10,000 BC. And there's other numbers that dispute that. You can say 6 to 7 million, but just for simplistic reasons, we're going to say 2.5 million years ago to 10,000 BC. During that time, humans lived a hunter-gatherer lifestyle. They were very active. They were always on their feet. They're all constantly having to find food every single day. And they're nomadics. They're constantly moving to find new food sources or follow animals. It's a very physically demanding lifestyle. So what were these people eating? They're eating vegetables, nuts, seeds, fish, lean meat, legumes, and fruits. So a lot of things that you have to find in the wild. These were not cultivated. They had to be picked in the wild. They weren't modified at all. There was no domesticated animals during this time. Everything was either hunted or gathered. Now we move into the Neolithic age. That's from about 10,000 BC to 4,500 BC. And this is when we start to see domesticated animals and domesticated plants. People are starting to stay in one place. And this is the start of monocrop agriculture, when people are starting to plant things like rice, corn, barley, things like that. So things that they would plant is wheat, barley, rice, corn, and they would have pigs, sheep, chickens, cows, flax, lentils. And this is also when you start to see problems like soil depletion happening, because they didn't really know about like crop rotations. So once you deplete the soil with one type of crop for a certain amount of time, the nutrient levels in the soil goes down. Therefore, everything on the way up of the food chain, including the animals you're feeding and yourself, is getting less nutrients. And I want to share this quote from an author that kind of explains it well. The agricultural revolution certainly enlarged the sum total of food at the disposal of humankind, but the extra food did not translate into a better diet or more leisure. Rather, it translated into a population explosions and pampered elites. The average farmer worked harder than the average forager and got a worse diet in return. He's kind of right about this. This is where you see things like the quality of people in interpersonal groups changing, because instead of having everyone need to go out and forage and everyone has an equal role in the community, you now have a hierarchy system with laborers and farmers at the bottom, and then you have more people at the top controlling that surplus food and get a power chain. So currently, as of today, the average American eats 2,100 calories per day. 47% of them come from carbohydrates, 36% come from fat, and 22% come from added sugars, 16% from protein. So I want to talk about those added sugars because that's where we start to see a lot of these heart disease issues coming from, around, like peaking around the 1920s when processed foods is introduced to the American diet. And a lot of causes of these heart issues come from surplus sugar in the diet. That's something that really never happened before in human history. We consume way more sugar now than any human did before. So what exactly processed foods is there's ultra processed foods, which is basically things that you're not going to find in your grandma's kitchen, really. These are the ingredients that you can't pronounce on the back of a ingredients listing. And processed food is slightly more normal things such as like sugar, corn syrup, flour, refined things. Those are things you're going to find in your kitchen. So just another breakdown of that. That's basically what I just said. It's so processed culinary ingredients, that's sugar, oils, fats, salt, and other substances extracted from foods or from nature. And then there's the ultra processed foods, which is like salt, sugar, oils, fats, include substances not used in culinary preparations. In particular, and highly processed foods come from, well, you can trace it all the way back to the Civil War when troops needed food that could be carried out into battlefields and stay good for a very long time. So that's when we start seeing things like canned food and hardtack and not very nutrient dense but calorie dense foods. And this technology also happened to prop up in the 1920s, but was really expanded in the 1950s during World War II, when a lot of people were not home and joining the workforce, and basically they couldn't be at home making home-cooked meals for the family, so pre-made, pre-preserved packaged foods started to really kick off in the 1950s. So I want to get into like a little bit of the complicatedness of the education of the American diet and how it was taught to us in schools. So we see the first food guide pyramid, and it's kind of hard for kids to conceptualize this, so they made it even more complicated by making this one in the middle here. But I think it's actually getting better now, because now they have the My Plate system, which is the one you see all the way on the right, and that makes it a lot better for American kids growing up to conceptualize what exactly their plate should look like and what they should be eating. So now let's get into the politics of things. So basically, you can only make money off of sick people, not cured people. We have a very for-profit healthcare system, if you didn't already know. But a lot of pharmaceutical companies have a lot of political leverage of what happens in laws and politics and labeling. So how much influence do they have on the FDA? Researchers started to notice a correlation between the advent of sugar consumption and processed foods. Research committees were formed to find the root causes of heart disease. though these studies were highly misconstrued by the Sugar Research Foundation that helped to lead the studies. An analysis of internal industry documents shows the correspondence between Harvard University's research team and the Sugar Research Foundation's team, leading to conclusions that would be more favorable to raise market shares in the sugar industry and not prioritizing Americans' health. The conclusions of their study led to the blame of fat and cholesterol as the root cause of heart disease, and not the real reason, excess sugar. The effects of the studies can still be seen today with all the low-fat labeling seen everywhere. The FDA. So basically, the FDA used to be all tax paid, and it was all taxpayer funded. But now about 45% of the FDA's budget comes from the actual entities it's supposed to be regulating. And here's a pie chart of the total fiscal year 2021 budget from the FDA. It's $6.1 billion, which for the size of the industry it regulates actually is not that much. Personally, I think it should move back to a completely all tax-paid system to limit the influence that industries could have on the FDA. Also, the advertisement pharmaceuticals, America and New Zealand are the only two countries where direct-to-consumer advertising is illegal. So everywhere else in the world, you don't see pharmaceutical companies advertising on television. So this increases advertising between patients and causes them to talk to providers and stimulates and increases prescription drug use. So basically, we try to sell you a pill for everything and do it the quick fix. Also, I really want to talk about sleep and health. This is coming from Dr. Matthew Walker. He is the head of neuroscience and psychology at University of California, Berkeley. He's a sleep expert. Some quick facts are 1.2 American car crashes are caused by drowsy driving. Sleeping less than 6 hours a night increases risk of heart attack by 300%. Sleep deprivation increases chance of diabetes. You will feel less full and more hungry when you are underslept. On average, 300 calories more. People eat 300 calories more a day in one study, and 10 to 15 pounds gained a year. The study of 23,000 Greek adults showed that there was a 37% increased risk of death from heart disease across a 6-year period when the siesta stopped. A single night of 4 hours of sleep reduces natural killer cells by 70%. These kill cancer cells. Studies show that sleeping less than 6 hours a night causes a 40% increase of cancer. Less sleep causes cancer to grow 200% faster in mice. Lack of sleep increases gastrointestinal problems by increasing cortisol, which is your stress hormone levels, and gut bacteria to grow in your gut. Sleep deprivation can cause high blood pressure, diabetes, heart attack, heart failure, and stroke. Also, Boston University did a really good video recently showing the effects of sleep in your brain, and this video basically shows your spinal fluid moving into your brain and cleaning out a bunch of toxins and debris while you sleep, and not a lot of Americans are getting enough of this. So there's a correlation between education levels and life expectancy and quality of life. This also has to do with income and accessibility to education on diet and exercise and the availability of it, and food quality. So I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit. America's pharmaceutical companies create some incredible drugs. Like, we have some of the best healthcare system in the world, but we pay high costs for it. And also in the world, we have 7 billion people we need to feed. So the ethics behind that, what's the greater good? What's more evil? Is it, making mass quantities of junk food that feeds the world, or should you try to make less food that's more healthy? That's a very big ethical debate. My proposed solutions are to ban lobbying done by junk food and pharmaceutical companies, provide warning labels on junk food similar to cigarettes, provide stronger warning labels on tobacco products similar to other countries. In other countries, they have pretty terrifying labeling on their tobacco products. They're a lot more scary than American ones and are a lot more convincing. We need to educate our youth on diet and exercise, nutrition and sleep, vitamins deficiencies and supplements, and I'm all in favor of government subsidized nutrition for impoverished families similar to WIC or expanding WIC, and lead the public away from acceptance of unhealthy lifestyles like smoking, overworking, obesity, and poor diet, where it's almost encouraged to overwork yourself in America, and in-depth physical education schools, expanding the deep science and how it affects our whole lives. And policymakers should give less weight to industry-funded studies that could be biased. And here are my research sources. I'll provide links below in the description. Thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation.